They don't write ballads about the kind of evil that hides behind money and power. Not out here in the dust, not beneath this Sunday. Out here the wind whispers secrets and the land holds its breath quiet like a coffin. And when something bad happens, it doesn't scream. It just arrives, uninvited as snake in the sagebrush, waiting for someone fool enough to open the door. That night, Judge Porter opened many doors. The windowless room deep within Porter's mansion lay still in near darkness, illuminated only by a single oil lamp casting long shadows across the cold stone. A woman sat bound to a wooden chair, her head slumped forward, dark hair, a curtain obscuring her face. Her fine dress now hung in tatters, a testament to the savagery that had come before. Porter stood before her, his judicial robes discarded for a simple black vest over a crisp white shirt. His silver pocket watch glinted in the faint light as he checked the time with practiced nonchalance. Last chance, Maria Dolores. His voice was a low hum, carrying no urgency, no anger, just a cold certainty. Where is the rest of the map? Where is your daughter hiding it? Maria Dolores raised her head, slowly revealing a face once beautiful now marred by a split lip and a swollen eye. Still, her gaze held defiance, of fire that refused to be quenched. I've told you there is no map. My daughter, she knows nothing. Porter sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. He nodded to a man, standing in the shadows, a brutish figure named Silas. Mark her, he commanded. The burly man stepped forward, holding an iron rod with a glowing end. The smell of heated metal filled the room, and Maria Dolores's eyes widened. She struggled against her restraints as Silas moved behind her, tearing the back of her dress open with one rough motion. The judge paid good money for you, the man growled, his breath a foul stench. Now you belong to him and to anyone he decides to sell you to. The rod descended. Maria Dolores's scream echoed through the mansion, a piercing, heart-wrenching cry that scraped against the stone foundation, a sound of agony and defiance. But the thick walls ensured no one in Tombstone would hear. Porter watched dispassionately, then leaned close to her ear. When you're ready to tell me about the map and your daughter, you can be returned. Until then, you'll be delivered to your new owner. Perhaps he'll have better luck making you talk. As consciousness faded, Maria Dolores's last thought was of her daughter's face and of a man she'd heard about, a former scout who lived alone in the desert. A man who might be her only hope. Dawn broke harsh and sudden over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in violent strokes of orange and crimson. Miles Sullivan stood on the weathered porch of his ranch house, watching the sun climb over the distant Dragoon Mountains. The cup of black coffee in his hand had gone cold, forgotten as he lost himself in the empty landscape. Tombstone lay 5 miles to the east, a smudge on the horizon, but it might as well have been another world. Out here, it was just Miles's horses and the ghost that had followed him from the war. He was 45 now, though the lines etched into his face, the silver threading his dark hair, suggested older. Tall and lean, he moved with the careful precision of a man who had learned that quick movements could get you killed. The desert had taught him patience. The war had taught him everything else. His eyes pale blue and sharp as a hawk's caught movement along the fence line. A wagon, small and battered, sat near his eastern boundary. No driver visible, just a mule tied to the post, looking as resigned to its fate as any creature Miles had ever seen. Something twisted in his gut, that old instinct that had kept him alive through years of scouting behind enemy lines. Something wasn't right. He set the coffee cup down and retrieved his Winchester rifle from inside the door. The weight of it felt familiar in his hands, a forgotten rhythm, as he made his way down the porch steps, boots crunching on the hard-packed earth. The morning heat already pressed down as he approached the wagon, rifle ready but not raised. 20 yards out, he stopped, studying the scene. No tracks leading away from the wagon, just the mule, the wagon, and something in the back covered by canvas. Miles circled carefully, scanning the horizon for any sign of watchers. Finding none, he approached the wagon from the side, catching the smell before he reached it. Blood, sweat, and something worse. Human misery had a scent all its own, one he remembered well from battlefield hospitals. A note had been tucked into the rope securing the canvas. Debt paid in full. Miles pulled back the covering, the rough material, scraping against his callous fingers. Beneath lay a woman curled on her side, wrists bound with rope. Her dress was torn, exposing a back crossed with wounds both fresh and healing. and there burned into her skin between her shoulder blades a single word: sin. For a moment, Miles stood frozen, a flood of memories threatening to drown him. Villages, burning women, screaming orders he'd followed because a uniform meant leaving your conscience at the door. The woman stirred, eyelids fluttering. She looked at him through a haze of pain, her cracked lips parting. "You paid for me," she whispered, her voice like sandpaper. "Now finish it." Miles didn't speak. He simply stood there staring as the sun climbed higher and the desert grew hotter around them. Because the truth is, some men fight wars and think they've seen hell. But hell isn't a battlefield. Hell is a human being dropped off at your door, carved up, and left to rot while somebody out there thinks they've done you a favor. The wind carried a wail from a distant horse, a mournful cry that seemed to echo his own silent turmoil. Miles carried the woman into his house, ignoring the blood that seeped into his shirt. He laid her gently on the bed in his spare room, a space that hadn't seen a visitor in years. He worked methodically, cutting away the ropes at her wrists, cleaning her wounds with whiskey and water. Her skin burned with fever. As he tended to her back, he studied the brand more closely. Sin. A simple word for such a deliberate cruelty. The burn was fresh, the skin around it angry and inflamed. In the war, he'd seen men branded as deserters. During his time as a government operative afterward, he'd seen worse. But there was something personal about this, something that spoke of hatred beyond mere punishment. Miles had no illusions about healing. He could clean wounds, stitch cuts, set bone skills learned on battlefields and in wilderness camps. But healing the kind of wounds this woman carried would take more than whiskey and bandages. Still, he worked through the morning and into the afternoon, applying salve to her back, wrapping clean strips of cloth around her torso, coaxing water between her lips when she seemed aware enough to swallow. By sunset, he had done all he could. The woman slept, her breathing shallow but steady. Miles sat in a chair by the window, rifle across his knees, watching the road that led to his ranch. Someone had brought her here specifically. "Debt paid in full," the note had said, but Miles owed no debts he knew of. As darkness fell, he lit a single lamp, keeping it low. The lamp cast just enough light for him to see the woman's face. In repose, with the dirt and blood washed away, he could see she had once been beautiful, still was perhaps beneath the bruising and exhaustion. The woman stirred, murmuring something unintelligible. Her eyes opened briefly, unfocused. "Esteban," she whispered. "My little girl." Then she was gone again, pulled back into unconsciousness. Miles remained in the chair all night, watching, waiting. The air grew heavy with unspoken hunger, a shared silent desire for salvation from the ghosts that haunted them both. Dawn found him still there, eyes red-rimmed but alert. He rose stiffly, muscles protesting the night in the hard chair. Outside, he checked his horses, fed the mule, then climbed the small rise behind his house. From there, he could see for miles in every direction. And there, just at the edge of his vision, he spotted a glint of light reflecting off glass. Someone was watching through a spyglass or binoculars. The figure was too distant to make out clearly, but Miles had no doubt. The game, whatever it was, had begun, and Miles had been pulled into it without his consent. For 3 days, the woman drifted in and out of consciousness. Miles changed her bandages, spooned broth into her mouth, and kept watch. The distant observer appeared each morning, watching for an hour before disappearing. On the 4th morning, Miles returned from feeding the horses to find the woman sitting up in bed, eyes clear for the first time. She flinched when he entered, pressing herself against the headboard. "You're safe," he said, keeping his distance, his voice rusty from disuse. She studied him, her eyes moving from his weathered face to his calloused hands, then to the rifle he'd propped by the door. "Where am I?" Her voice was stronger now. "My ranch 5 miles west of Tombstone," Miles replied. "You were left in a wagon at my fence line 4 days ago." Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed by a flash of something, calculation, perhaps. "You didn't send for me." Miles shook his head. "Number note said, debt paid in full, but I don't know what debt." She looked down at her hands, now free of rope, but still marked with angry red welts. "My name is Maria Dolores. I used to be a school teacher in Tombstone." She raised her eyes to his. "And you're Miles Wyatt Sullivan, former Army scout, served under General Sherman." Miles stiffened. "How do you know that?" "Everyone in Tombstone knows about the reclusive ex-soldier who trains horses and never comes to town," she said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. But I know more because my late husband, was a newspaper man. He collected stories. And what's your story, Mrs. Morgan? Miles kept his voice neutral, though suspicion had flared inside him. This was no random delivery. Maria Dolores's eyes darted to the window, then back to Miles. I was arrested 2 months ago. The charge was false interfering with a county official. My husband Esteban had been investigating Judge Porter for corruption. After Esteban was killed, I continued asking questions. Her voice faltered. They took my daughter Sophia. She's 7. I don't know where she is now. Miles remained silent, waiting. Judge Porter said I was to be made an example of. He sold me like property. Her hand unconsciously moved to her back. But I arranged it. I made sure I was sold to you. Why me? He asked. Because you were a scout. Because you know how to fight. Because you've killed men before. Her eyes hardened. And because I need someone who can help me find my daughter and stop Porter before he destroys more lives. Miles stood abruptly, moving to the window. You've made a mistake. I'm not that man anymore. I don't fight other people's battles. This became your battle the moment they left me at your door, Maria Dolores said quietly. Porter knows I'm here. He'll come for me, and for you. You're involved whether you want to be or not. Miles turned back to her, his expression grim. Then I'll deal with Porter if he comes here. But I'm not going to Tombstone looking for trouble. Maria Dolores watched him for a long moment, then reached for the cup of water by the bed. As she did, her sleeve pulled back, revealing a small drawing tucked into the lining of her dress. It slipped out, falling onto the blanket, a child's drawing of a woman and a girl, holding hands with the words "I love you, Mama" written in uneven letters. Maria Dolores quickly tucked the drawing away, but not before Miles had seen the naked pain in her eyes. It was the same look he'd seen in his own reflection for years after the war, after losing his own family while he was away fighting other men's battles. Rest, he said more gently. We'll talk more when you're stronger. As he left the room, Miles knew he was already being pulled into something he'd spent years trying to avoid. The world he'd left behind had found him again. This time it had brought something else too. A woman with the same haunted eyes he saw in the mirror, and a child lost in the crossfire. As Maria Dolores regained her strength over the next few days, Miles kept his distance, providing food and fresh bandages but avoiding conversation. He spent his days tending the horses, watching the horizon, and thinking. At night he sat on the porch, a bottle of whiskey, his only company. In the stillness memories crept in, villages burning along Sherman's march. The silent aftermath. The blood on his hands had never quite washed off. On the 6th evening, Maria Dolores joined him on the porch. She moved carefully, her wound still painful but healing. Without asking, she sat in the second chair, the one that had remained empty for years. They sat in silence for a long, while watching darkness claim the desert. Why did you come out here? She finally asked. After the war, after everything, why choose this place? Miles took a sip of whiskey, considering whether to answer. Wanted emptiness, he said finally. Spent too long around people. Needed space to hear myself think. And what did you hear? Miles glanced at her, surprised by the question. Nothing good, he admitted. That's why I stay out here. To keep the devils contained. Maria Dolores nodded, as if his answer confirmed something for her. My husband was like that at first, she said softly. He covered the war as a journalist, saw terrible things. Came back changed. But he found his way back through words, through seeking truth. Truth is overrated, Miles said. Mostly just hurts people. Lies hurt more in the end. They fell silent again. An owl called from somewhere nearby, its cry lonely in the darkness. There's a rider watching your ranch, Maria Dolores said suddenly. Every morning on the eastern ridge. Miles nodded. I've seen him. It's one of Porter's men. They're making sure I'm here. She turned to face him. They'll come eventually when they think I'm well enough to talk. What do they think you know? Maria Dolores hesitated, weighing her words carefully. Porter isn't just corrupt. He's looking for something, a treasure from the Civil War. Union gold that was hidden when they retreated from Confederate forces in this territory. Her voice dropped lower. My husband found part of a map. I hid it with Sophia before they took me and her doll. Porter wants it. Miles studied her face in the dim light. Is that the real reason you arranged to be sent here? You think I can help you find this treasure? No, Maria, Dolores said firmly. I want my daughter back. Nothing else matters. But Porter won't stop looking for that map, and Sophia won't be safe until he's exposed or stopped. The implications hung in the air between them. I'm not an assassin, Miles said quietly. I'm not asking you to be, she replied, her eyes gleaming in the darkness. I'm asking you to help me save my daughter, to fight one more battle for someone who can't fight for themselves. Miles stood abruptly, walking to the edge of the porch's back to Maria Dolores. I had a son once and a wife, he said, his voice low and rough. They died of fever while I was away hunting a man the government wanted found. I was good at finding people. Too good. And while I was tracking a stranger across Tennessee, my own family needed me. He turned to face her. So don't talk to me about fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. Sometimes, the people who need you most are the ones you've already failed. Maria Dolores didn't flinch from his anger. Then help me not fail my daughter. Miles didn't answer. He picked up the whiskey bottle and walked into the darkness beyond the house. Maria Dolores watched him go, then reached into her dress lining and pulled out her daughter's drawing. In the faint light from the house, she traced her finger over the childish lines, a single tear trailing down her cheek. A blood-stained handkerchief, a symbol of past sacrifice and future peril, lay on her lap. Miles didn't return until dawn, his clothes damp with dew, his eyes bloodshot from a night without sleep. He found Maria Dolores in the kitchen, attempting to prepare breakfast despite her injuries. Sit, he said, gruffly. I'll do that. She obeyed, watching as he expertly cracked eggs into a pan, sliced bread, and brewed coffee. He moved with efficient precision, a man accustomed to caring for himself. I'm riding into town today, he announced as he set a plate before her. Need supplies? Maria Dolores looked up sharply. You shouldn't go alone. Porter's men need to see me living my normal life, Miles interrupted. If I hide, they'll know something's wrong. Then I'm coming with you. Miles shook his head. You're not strong enough yet, and you'd be recognized. I need to find out about Sophia. Please. The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. Miles sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. I'll ask around carefully, but you stay here. He fixed her with a stern look. There's a shotgun under my bed. Anyone comes who isn't me, you use it. Understood. Maria Dolores nodded, relief and fear mingling in her expression. Miles finished his breakfast in silence, then prepared for the ride to town. He dressed in his usual attire, but added a gun belt with a Colt revolver. Before leaving, he paused at the door. Lock this behind me. Don't open it for anyone. Maria Dolores nodded, then asked, what if you don't come back? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Then ride west, Miles said simply. Keep going till you hit California. Start over. With that, he was gone, mounting his bay gelding and riding toward Tombstone. The town had changed since Miles had last visited. New buildings stood where empty lots had been, a sign of Tombstone's continued growth despite the decline in silver mining. The main street bustled with activity. Miles tied his horse outside the general store and went about his business with practiced efficiency, purchasing flour, coffee, ammunition, and medical supplies. At the saloon, he paused. The Oriental was the center of Tombstone's information network. If he wanted news about Porter, this was where to start. The saloon was dim and smoky inside. Miles ordered a whiskey and took it to a corner table with his back to the wall. He didn't have to wait long. A stooped figure approached, moving with the careful gait of the elderly. Well, the hermit emerges from his cave. Miles looked up into the watery eyes of Doc Holliday, once the most feared dentist and gambler in the territory, now a shadow of his former self. Doc, Miles acknowledged with a nod. Take a seat if you're going to. Must be something important to bring you to town. You're about as social as a rattlesnake with a toothache. Miles allowed a small smile. Just supplies. Bullshit, Doc said cheerfully. You've got that look, the one that says you're hunting. Miles took a slow sip of his whiskey. Just curious about some things happening in town, such as Judge Porter. Heard he's been busy lately. Doc's expression sobered. Porter's always busy building his little empire. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Word is he's been acquiring property and not just land, people. Miles kept his face neutral. Slavery's been over a while now, Doc. Tell that to the women who go missing or the Chinese workers who disappear from the mines. Doc gave a wet, rattling laugh. Porter calls it indentured servitude, but everyone knows what it really island. Anyone standing against him, the sheriff, he's in Porter's pocket. The newspaper, the last editor who asked questions ended up dead in an alley. Robbery gone wrong, they said. Esteban Miles thought grimly. What about family members, anyone looking for these missing people? Some try. Most get bought off or scared away. Doc studied Miles intently. You asking for a particular reason, someone you know gone missing? Miles shrugged. Just curious why the law allows it. Law is what men with power say it is, Doc said bitterly. Always has been. Even when Wyatt Earp was cleaning up this town, he was just substituting his law for someone else's. Miles finished his whiskey. One more question. You hear anything about a little girl about 7 years old, named Sophia, might have been taken by Porter or his men? Doc's eyes narrowed. You're playing with fire, Miles. Just answer the question. Doc sighed. Porter's got a place outside town. Big house with lots of guards. Rumor is he keeps special guests there. Could be your girl is there, if Porter took her. Miles nodded, placing a coin on the table. Thanks, Doc. As he stood to leave, Doc grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Whatever you're planning, don't. Porter is not just a corrupt judge. He's got connections all the way to the governor, and he's obsessed with finding some old treasure. A man like that with that kind of obsession and power. Doc shook his head. He'll kill anyone who gets in his way. Miles gently removed Doc's hand. I'll keep that in mind. Outside, Miles mounted his horse and rode slowly through town, memorizing the layout. As he passed the courthouse, he saw a figure watching from an upper window. A tall man in a black suit, his face partially obscured by the reflection on the glass. Judge Porter. Miles guessed, already aware of his presence in town. The ride back to the ranch was tense. Miles constantly checked for followers. None materialized, but the feeling of being watched never left him. As he approached his property, movement caught his eye. A rider on the eastern ridge, the watcher. But this time, instead of staying distant, the figure turned and rode directly toward Miles's ranch. Miles spurred his horse to a gallop, racing to intercept the rider. His hand went to the Winchester, pulling it smoothly from its holster as he rode. The two riders converged in a cloud of dust 100 yards from the ranch house. Miles raised his rifle, aimed at the stranger's chest. That's far enough, he called. The rider stopped, raising empty hands slowly. I'm not here to fight Sullivan. The man was Native American, older than Miles by perhaps a decade, his face deeply lined, long gray hair tied back. He sat his horse with the easy confidence of someone born to the saddle. Who are you? Miles demanded, rifle still raised. My people call me Eagerly. The man's voice was calm, his English perfect but accented. I've been watching you and the woman. Why? Because Porter's men are also watching, and because I have been waiting for you to remember who you are. The man lowered his hand slowly. You were once a warrior who fought for what he believed in. I think perhaps you will be again. Miles frowned. You know nothing about me. I know more than you think. Miles Sullivan. Eagle-Eye's dark eyes seemed to pierce through him. I know you served under Sherman. I know you burned villages. And I know you have tried to bury those memories here in the desert. Miles's finger tightened on the trigger. How do you know these things? Because I was there. Eagle-Eye said simply. My village was one of those your soldiers burned. I watched from the hills as my home turned to ash. A cold knot formed in Miles's stomach. If you're here for revenge, get on with it. Eagle-Eye shook his head. If I wanted you dead, you would be already. I've had many chances over the years. A faint smile touched his lips. I have been watching you for a very long time, Miles Sullivan. Waiting for what? For you to wake up, to remember that running from the past does not erase it. Eagle-Eye nodded toward the ranch house. That woman brought your past back to you, and now you must choose. Continue hiding or stand and fight. Miles lowered his rifle slightly. What's your stake in this? Porter has taken land from my people, killed those who resisted, and now he searches for something that does not belong to him, something sacred. Eagle-Eye's expression hardened. The treasure he seeks is not gold as he believes. It is proof documents that show this land was given to the Apache by treaty. Documents the government would prefer remain lost. Miles's mind raced, connecting the pieces. And you think Porter has these documents? Number he has part of a map. The woman's husband found it, I believe, but there are other pieces. Eagle-Eye reached slowly into his saddlebag and withdrew something wrapped in buckskin. Like this one. He unwrapped it, revealing a yellowed piece of paper with partial markings that appeared to be part of a map. Together, these pieces will lead to the documents and to gold that was hidden with them. Porter wants the gold. I want the documents. The woman wants her child. I think perhaps we can help each other. Miles studied the Apache, weighing his words. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, Eagle Eye said bluntly. Trust must be earned. But we have a common enemy and time grows short. Porter will move soon either against you directly or against those who might help you. As if to punctuate his words, a gunshot echoed from the direction of the ranch house. Then another. Miles wheeled his horse around, heart pounding. Maria Dolores. He spurred his horse into a gallop, racing toward the house, aware of Eagle Eye following close behind. The front door of the ranch house stood open. Miles dismounted in a fluid motion, rifle raised, and moved swiftly to the entrance. Inside, he found Maria Dolores standing in the main room. The shotgun in her hand, smoke still curling from the barrel. On the floor lay a man, blood pooling beneath him, his eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. He came through the window, she said, her voice remarkably steady. Said Porter sent him to bring me back. She looked up at Miles, her eyes hard. I told you they would come. Miles knelt beside the dead man, searching his pockets. He found a folded paper, orders to retrieve the woman and bring her to Porter's estate. And something else, a small tintype photograph of a little girl, dark-haired and solemn, holding a cloth doll. Sophia Maria Dolores whispered, taking the photograph with trembling hands. She's alive. Miles stood, his decision made. The world he tried to leave behind had found him. The past he tried to bury had resurfaced. There would be no more running. Pack whatever you can carry, he told Maria Dolores. We leave in an hour. Where are we going? She asked, still clutching the photograph. Miles glanced at Eagle Eye, who stood in the doorway, observing silently. To war, Miles answered simply. Again, the sun was setting over the desert, painting the landscape in blood-red hues. As darkness fell, 3 riders left the ranch, heading not toward Tombstone, but deeper into the wilderness. Behind them, the ranch house burned a beacon in the night, a signal that Miles Sullivan was done hiding. The battle for Maria Dolores' daughter, for the Apache documents, for justice in a lawless land had begun. The desert at night belonged to ghosts and memories. Miles had learned this during his first weeks in Arizona. Tonight, the weight of the past rode with them, 3 silhouettes moving through darkness, following game trails and dry creek beds to avoid leaving tracks. Miles led the way. Maria Dolores rode in the middle, and Eagle Eye brought up the rear. The burning ranch behind them cast an orange glow on the horizon, a message to Porter that the game had changed. They had been riding for hours. Maria Dolores swayed slightly in the saddle, her wounds making the journey painful, but she hadn't complained once. Finally, as the eastern sky began to lighten, Miles guided them into a narrow canyon. We'll rest here, he announced, dismounting stiffly. Eagle Eye nodded approval. Good choice. Water nearby. He pointed to a small seep at the base of the canyon wall. They established camp with practiced efficiency. No fire was lit. It was too dangerous. As the horses drank, the 3 travelers sat in the shadow of a boulder, sharing jerky and hardtack. Porter will have men searching by now, Maria Dolores said, breaking the silence. They'll find the body at your ranch. That was the point, Miles replied. Let them waste time searching there while we move in the other direction. And where exactly are we going? She asked. Miles looked to the Apache, deferring the question. Eagle Eye pulled the buckskin-wrapped map fragment from his saddlebag. We need the other pieces of this map to find what Porter seeks. Your husband found one piece. Where is it now? Maria Dolores' hand unconsciously moved to the small pocket where she kept her daughter's drawing. Sophia has it hidden in her doll. Porter's estate, Miles said. According to Doc, that's where he keeps special guests. It is heavily guarded, Eagle Eye added. Many men with guns, stone walls like a fortress. Maria Dolores' face fell. Then how do we get to her? Miles leaned forward, his voice low but determined. We don't attack directly. That's suicide. We need information first, then a plan. He turned to Eagle Eye. You said Porter is looking for documents proving Apache land rights. Why does he want them? To destroy them. The treaties give my people claim to land that holds silver, copper, and water, Eagle Eye said simply. With the documents gone, there is no proof. The government can take what it wants, and the gold. Miles pressed. Payment from the Union Army to the Apache for safe passage during the war. Hidden with the documents for safekeeping, Eagle Eye's expression darkened. Many died protecting these secrets, including my son. The revelation hung in the air. Maria Dolores reached out briefly, touching Eagle Eye's weathered hand. I'm sorry. The Apache nodded. accepting her sympathy with dignity. Miles resumed pacing. So Porter wants the gold and needs to destroy the documents. We need to rescue Sophia and get the map piece she has. He stopped looking at Eagle Eye. You have a piece. Maria Dolores' daughter has a piece. Is there more? One more. Eagle Eye confirmed. Held by a man in Tombstone, a banker named Holloway. Miles raised an eyebrow. Why would a banker have part of an Apache treasure map? Because he was once a Union officer, Eagle Eye explained. Captain James Holloway. He helped hide the gold and documents during the war. When the fighting ended, he stayed. Became part of the town, and Porter doesn't know he has it, Maria Dolores asked. Porter suspects but cannot move against a respected banker without proof. Eagle Eye's eyes gleamed in the dim light. Unlike a newspaper man or a school teacher, some people are too powerful to simply disappear. Miles resumed pacing. So, we need to contact this Holloway, see if he'll help us. And how do we do that without alerting Porter's men? Maria Dolores asked. They'll be watching for us in town. Miles turned to her, a grim smile on his face. We don't go as ourselves. Tombstone's First National Bank stood imposing on Allen Street, its stone facade a statement of permanence in a town built largely of wood. Inside, behind a polished desk, James Holloway reviewed ledgers. At 62, Holloway retained the rigid posture of his military days. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. Enter, he called. His secretary opened the door. Sir, there's an Apache here to see you. Says he's selling horses. Holloway frowned. I'm not in the market for horses, Roberts. Yes, sir. That's what I told him. But he insisted you'd want to see these particular horses. Said something about them being descendants of Sherman's mount. Holloway's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly alert. Sherman's mount, you say? Send him in. Moments later, Eagle Eye entered dressed in simple clothing, leading a bay gelding that Holloway recognized immediately as a cavalry-bred animal. The Apache's face betrayed nothing as he nodded respectfully. Mr. Holloway, I bring horses of exceptional bloodline. Holloway dismissed the secretary with a wave. When the door closed, he spoke quietly. I know you. You're Shadow Walker's son. Eagle Eye nodded once. And you are Captain Holloway, who helped my father hide what must not be found. Holloway's shoulders tensed. That was a long time ago. Why come to me now? Because Porter seeks what was hidden. He has part of the map. Others have other parts. The time has come to either unite the pieces or destroy them all. Holloway stood abruptly, moving to the window. Porter's been asking questions. Subtle at first, then less so. 2 weeks ago, my house was broken into. Nothing was taken, but my study was searched thoroughly. Did he find what he sought? Holloway gave a short, humorless laugh. I learned in the war never to keep valuable intelligence where others might expect it. He returned to his desk, unlocking a drawer. I've been waiting for this day, dreading it if I'm honest. From the drawer, he removed a small key, which he pressed into Eagle Eye's palm. Safe deposit box number 27. The bank across the street, not this one. The map piece is inside, along with letters from your father that prove the treaty's legitimacy. Eagle Eye closed his fingers around the key. You have honored your promise to my father, the Apache will remember. I'm an old man now, Holloway said quietly. Too old to fight another war. But there's a Remington rifle and ammunition in the box as well. My contribution to your cause. We thank you, Eagle Eye said. But we need more than weapons. We need to know about Porter's estate. His defenses, where he might keep a child prisoner. Holloway's eyebrows rose. A child. Porter has taken a little girl to control her mother, who has another piece of the map. The banker's face darkened with anger. That crosses a line even Porter shouldn't dare. He moved to a cabinet and withdrew a rolled paper. This is a survey map of the county. Porter's estate is here about 3 miles east of town. He spread the map on his desk. Main house is stone, 2 stories with a cellar beneath. Guards patrol the perimeter day and night, but there's a weakness. The water supply comes from this creek through pipes that enter the cellar. The intake is here, hidden in a stand of cottonwoods. A man could follow the pipe. Eagle Eye studied the map, intently memorizing every detail. One more thing, Holloway said, lowering his voice further. Porter has a special guest arriving tomorrow. Some government man from back east. Rumors say he's coming about the Apache land dispute. Could be coincidence. There are no coincidences in war, Eagle Eye finished. When does this man arrive? Noon, stage from Tucson. Eagle Eye nodded, committing this to memory as well. "We are in your debt, Captain." Holloway shook his head. "I made a promise to your father. The debt was mine." He hesitated, then added, "Tell whoever's with you. Porter is not just a corrupt judge. There's something wrong with the man, something broken. He enjoys causing pain. Be careful." Eagerly nodded once more, then slipped out the door, leading the horse. Outside, he passed a woman in a simple dress and bonnet, her face partially obscured, carrying a basket of eggs. Maria Dolores, in disguise, on her way to gather information in the town market. Neither acknowledged the other as they went about their separate missions. Miles waited at the rendezvous point, a small grove of mesquite trees a mile outside town. He had changed his appearance as much as possible. Shaved his beard, trimmed his hair, exchanged his usual clothes for the garb of a traveling salesman. As he waited, he cleaned his rifle methodically, the familiar routine calming his mind. The weapon was more than a tool to him. It was an extension of himself, a reminder of skills he had hoped never to use again. Movement caught his eye. Maria Dolores approached on foot, her basket now full of supplies. "Any trouble?" he asked as she reached him. She shook her head. "No one looked twice at me, just another woman shopping." She set down the basket, revealing bread, cheese, and a bottle of whiskey beneath the eggs. "I overheard things in the market. People talking about a fire at a ranch west of town, and about Judge Porter offering a reward for information about a woman matching my description." Miles nodded grimly. "Expected as much. What about Sophia?" "Any word?" Maria Dolores's composure faltered slightly. "Nothing specific, but I spoke to a Mexican woman who works as a laundress for Porter's estate. She confirmed there's a child there, a little girl kept in a room on the second floor, not allowed outside." Hope and fear warred in her expression. Miles placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, an awkward gesture of comfort. "That's good news," he said. "Means she's alive, and we know where to find her." Maria Dolores nodded, blinking back tears. "Yes, now we just have to get her out of a fortress guarded by armed men." She attempted a smile. Simple. Miles almost smiled back, surprised by her resilience. "Eagle Eye should be back soon," he said, returning to his rifle. "Then we'll make a plan." They waited in companionable silence, each lost in thought. After a while, Maria Dolores spoke again, her voice softer. "That first night when you sat outside my room, you were guarding me, weren't you? Making sure I was safe." Miles continued cleaning his rifle, not meeting her eyes. "Just being cautious. No one's done that for me in a long time, watched over me." She looked down at her hands. "Not since Esteban died." Miles said, nothing uncomfortable with her gratitude. "He was a good man, my husband," she continued. "Believed in justice and standing up for what's right. It got him killed. Porter's men beat him to death in an alley behind the newspaper office. Made it look like a robbery." "I'm sorry," Miles said, the words feeling inadequate. Maria Dolores raised her eyes to his. "When they brought me to Porter after Esteban died, I thought he'd have me killed too. Instead, he..." Her hand moved unconsciously to her back, where the brand lay hidden. "He said he was marking me so I'd remember my place." Miles's hand tightened on the rifle. "We'll make him pay for that." "It's not about vengeance," she said, though her eyes told a different story. "It's about Sophia, about making sure she has a future." Before Miles could respond, Eagle Eye appeared silently from among the trees, leading his horse. "Success?" Miles asked, standing. The Apache nodded, producing the key and the folded map. "Holloway has kept his word. The map piece is in a bank vault, and he provided information about Porter's estate." He quickly related what he'd learned. The layout of the property, the water pipe entrance, the coming arrival of a government official. "This changes things," Miles said, thinking aloud. "If a federal official is coming, Porter will be distracted. Security might be focused on impressing the visitor rather than watching for intruders. Or he could double his guards," Maria Dolores countered. "Holloway offered us shelter," Eagle Eye said. "A lined shack on his property. We can rest there, make proper plans." Miles nodded. "Good. We'll retrieve the map piece from the bank, then head to the shack. After dark, I'll scout Porter's estate, see these water pipes for myself." As they prepared to move out, Maria Dolores suddenly froze, her gaze fixed on something in the distance. "Riders," she whispered. "Coming this way." Miles immediately dropped to one knee, rifle ready, scanning the horizon. 3 horsemen approached from the direction of Tombstone. "Porter's men?" Maria Dolores asked, fear edging her voice. Eagle Eye shook his head. "Sheriff and deputies. Regular patrol, perhaps. We're looking for us, Miles said grimly. Mount up, casual pace. Act like we belong here. They rode out from the shelter of the trees, angling away from the approaching lawmen. The sheriff slowed his horse, studying them with narrowed eyes. Afternoon, he called. You folks heading to Tombstone? Just leaving actually, Miles replied amicably. Got business in Bisbee. The sheriff's gaze lingered on Maria Dolores, whose face remained partially hidden by her bonnet. The lady with you, my sister Miles lied smoothly. Coming to help with my children after my wife's passing. The sheriff seemed to consider this, then nodded. Sorry for your loss. His eyes shifted to Eagle Eye. He with you too? Guide and tracker, Miles said. Not familiar with this territory myself. One of the deputies leaned toward the sheriff, whispering something. The sheriff frowned, then addressed Miles again. Mind if I ask your name? Mr. Miles felt tension coil in his stomach, but kept his expression neutral. Samuel Parker. Cincinnati, originally. Mr. Parker, we're looking for some folks who might have passed this way. A woman injured, and 2 men, one white, one Indian. The sheriff's hand rested casually near his holster. You seen anyone like that? Miles shook his head. Can't say we have. Road's been quiet. He gestured vaguely westward. Saw some smoke yesterday, though. Looked like a fire some ways out. The sheriff nodded. Ranch fire. Suspicious circumstances. He studied Miles a moment longer, then apparently decided they weren't worth further questioning. Well, safe travels to Bisbee, Mr. Parker. Appreciate it, Sheriff. The lawman rode on toward Tombstone, and Miles released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was too close, Maria Dolores murmured when the riders were out of earshot. It's going to get closer, Miles replied. Let's move. Bank first, then the line shack. The safe deposit box contained exactly what Holloway had promised, a map fragment on aged parchment letters, detailing the treaties, and a Remington rifle with ammunition. Eagerly examined the map piece with reverence, carefully placing it with the fragment he already possessed. 2 pieces of 3, he said. Almost complete. They reached the line shack as dusk was settling. The small structure was basic but solid. Maria Dolores immediately set about making the place habitable, her teacher's instinct for order asserting itself. Eagle Eye tended the horses, while Miles inventoried their weapons and supplies. As night fell, they shared a simple meal. The domestic normalcy of it felt strange to Miles, who had grown accustomed to solitary evenings. Stranger still was how comfortable it felt despite the circumstances. After eating, Eagle Eye spread the combined map fragments on the table. Even incomplete, a picture was emerging: landmarks, directions, and what appeared to be the location of a cave in a distinctive rock formation. The 3rd piece would show the exact location, Eagle Eye explained. Without it, we could search for months and never find the entrance. Miles studied the map thoughtfully. Porter doesn't have the other pieces. He doesn't know we've combined these 2. That gives us an advantage. Only if we can get Sophia out, Maria Dolores said firmly. That's the priority. Miles nodded. Agreed. I'll scout the estate tonight. Assess the water pipe entry Holloway mentioned. I should come with you, Eagle Eye said. Miles shook his head. Too risky for both of us to go. If I'm caught, you and Maria Dolores will need to find another way. He began checking his weapons. Maria Dolores watched him, concern evident in her expression. Be careful, she said softly. Sophia needs all of us. Miles met her gaze, struck by the genuine worry in her eyes. It had been a long time since anyone had cared whether he returned from a mission. The feeling was both comforting and unsettling. I'll be back before dawn, he promised. The night was clear and cool as Miles made his way toward Porter's estate. Porter's estate came into view shortly before midnight, a sprawling property surrounded by a high stone wall. The main house rose like a fortress in the center. Miles circled the perimeter, staying well back, counting guards, and noting patrol patterns: 8 men that he could see moving in pairs, each circuit taking approximately 20 minutes. Following Holloway's directions, he located the creek and the stand of cottonwoods that concealed the water intake. The area was less heavily patrolled. Miles waited for a patrol to pass, then moved quickly to the cottonwoods. The water intake was there, as described: a metal grate covering a pipe approximately 2 feet in diameter. The grate was secured with a padlock. The pipe itself was large enough for a man to crawl through. As he prepared to withdraw, voices reached him: guards approaching. Miles pressed himself against the trunk of a cottonwood, becoming one with the shadows. New girl's a pretty one guard was saying. Porter's got her all cleaned up for the government man's visit. Lucky bastard, the second guard replied. We risk our necks out here, and he gets all the comforts. Speaking of comfort, I heard the little girl's been asking for her mother again, crying at night. Porter should just get rid of her. Too much trouble. Nah, he needs her. Says the mother will come for her eventually. Then he'll have them both. The first guard laughed. And the map piece. Don't forget that. Porter's obsessed with finding that treasure. You believe it exists. Don't know. Don't care. Long as Porter keeps paying, I'll help him chase ghosts. Their voices faded as they moved past. Miles remained motionless until he was certain they were gone, then silently made his way back into the desert. The water pipe was viable. Sophia was definitely in the house. And Porter was expecting Maria Dolores to come for her daughter, had set a trap. But Porter didn't know about Eagle Eye or about Miles himself. That misplaced confidence would be his weakness. Dawn was breaking as Miles returned to the line shack. He found Maria Dolores awake, sitting by the window, a cup of coffee cooling before her. Relief washed over her face when she saw him. You're back, she said simply. Told you I would be. Miles accepted the cup of coffee she offered, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. Where's Eagle Eye? Said he needed fresh meat. Maria Dolores studied his face. What did you find? Miles related his discoveries, the layout, the guards, the water pipe entrance, and the conversation he'd overheard. Sophia's there, he confirmed. Alive and well enough to be asking for you. Maria Dolores closed her eyes, briefly composing herself. And Porter's using her as bait, waiting for me. Yes, but he's not expecting us to come in from below. Miles outlined his plan. Maria Dolores listened intently. It could work, she finally said, but it's incredibly dangerous. No more dangerous than leaving Sophia there, Miles pointed out. Porter knows you have a map piece. Eventually, he'll decide Sophia isn't enough leverage and come looking for you directly. Maria Dolores nodded, her resolve visibly strengthening. When do we move? Tomorrow. When the government man arrives. Miles drained his coffee cup. We'll need supplies, rope, dark clothing, weapons. I can shoot, Maria Dolores said, anticipating his next question. Esteban taught me after he started receiving threats. Miles nodded, unsurprised. Good, you'll need to. Eagle Eye returned shortly after bringing 2 rabbits he'd snared. As he prepared them for cooking, Miles outlined the plan. The Apache listened without interruption. It is a good plan, he said when Miles finished. But I would make one change. The woman should not enter the house. Maria Dolores immediately protested. It's my daughter in there. Precisely, Eagle Eye said calmly. Your emotions will make you vulnerable, and if Porter sees you, he will know something is wrong. His men are looking for a mother, not 2 men. Miles considered this. He's right, Maria Dolores. You'd be recognized more easily than either of us. I won't stay behind while you risk your lives for my daughter, she insisted. Not behind, Eagle Eye clarified. Outside with the horses ready. When we find the child, we will need to leave quickly. Someone must secure our escape. Maria Dolores looked from Eagle Eye to Miles, clearly torn between maternal instinct and tactical necessity. He's making sense, Miles said gently. We need you, just not inside. After a long moment, she nodded reluctantly. Fine, but if anything goes wrong, if Sophia is in danger, I'm coming in after her. Understood. Miles met her determined gaze and saw not just a mother's love, but a fighter's resolve. This woman had endured Porter's cruelty and emerged not broken, but hardened like steel. Understood, he agreed. They spent the remainder of the day preparing. As the evening approached, a strange calm settled over the trio. After dinner, Maria Dolores excused herself to step outside. Miles found her later sitting on a fallen log, staring at the stars. Without a word, he sat beside her, offering a cup of coffee laced with whiskey. She accepted it with a small smile of thanks. When I was a girl, she said after a while, my father taught me the constellations. Said they were stories written in the sky, unchanging no matter what happened on Earth. She took a sip of the coffee. I've been looking for Orion. That was Sophia's favorite, but it's the wrong season. Miles looked up at the vast canopy of stars. I never learned their names, just used them for navigation. Always practical. Maria Dolores observed a hint of teasing in her voice. Had to be. In my line of work, practical kept you alive. And what about now? She asked, turning to study his profile in the moonlight. Is this practical? helping a woman you barely know rescue her daughter from a powerful man? Miles considered the question. No, he admitted. Not practical at all. Then why? The question hung between them, simple yet profound. Miles took a long drink of his coffee, weighing his words. Because sometimes practical isn't right, he finally said. And because I've spent too long hiding from what I've done, maybe it's time to do something worth doing. Maria Dolores' hand found his in the darkness, her fingers cool against his skin. Thank you, she whispered, for being impractical. Miles didn't pull away, allowing the contact, the human connection he denied himself for so long. They sat in companionable silence, each lost in thoughts of the day to come. Inside the shack, eagerly observed them through the window, a knowing expression crossing his face. Then he turned away, giving them their privacy, and continued preparing for battle. Tomorrow, they would confront Porter. Tomorrow, the past and present would collide. The government man arrived precisely at noon as scheduled. The stagecoach rolled into Tombstone, drawing the attention of townsfolk and Porter's men alike. From their vantage point on a hill, Miles, Maria Dolores, and Eagle Eye watched through a spyglass as a tall figure in an Eastern suit descended from the coach, greeted by Judge Porter himself. Right on time, Miles murmured. Porter's occupied. Now we move. They had spent the morning positioning themselves, establishing a camp in a dry wash half a mile from Porter's estate. The horses were hidden, saddled, and ready. Maria Dolores, dressed in dark clothing with a bandana ready to cover her face, would wait with the mounts. Remember, Miles told her, if we're not back by sunset, take the horses and ride for Tucson. Find the federal marshal there. Tell him everything. Maria Dolores shook her head firmly. I'm not leaving without Sophia. You might have to, Miles said, his voice gentle but insistent. Sophia needs her mother alive, not captured or killed. Maria Dolores pulled something from her pocket, the small drawing her daughter had made. Give this to her, she said, pressing it into Miles's hand. So she knows I'm here, that I came for her. Miles nodded carefully, tucking the drawing into his shirt pocket. We'll bring her back. I promise. Eagerly approached, carrying the Remington rifle. It is time, he said simply. With a final nod to Maria Dolores, the two men departed. They moved silently, using the terrain for cover, and reached the cottonwoods without incident. Eagle Eye produced a set of slim, metal tools, lockpicks, fashioned from horseshoe nails. My father taught me, he explained. Said understanding white man's locks was important. The rusted padlock yielded quickly. They removed the grate, revealing the dark tunnel of the pipe. I'll go first, Miles said, pulling the bandana up to cover his nose and mouth. Wait for my signal. The tunnel was even tighter than Miles had anticipated, forcing him to crawl on his stomach. The darkness was absolute. After what felt like an eternity, the pipe began to slope upward. Eventually, it terminated in another grate, this one secured from the inside. Miles worked a small knife through the grate, finding a simple hook and eye. With careful manipulation, he managed to lift the hook free. The grate swung open, and Miles emerged into a dim cellar. He quickly oriented himself, then gave a low whistle, the signal for Eagle Eye to follow. While waiting, Miles took stock of his surroundings. A second, smaller staircase led to a separate exit. Eagle Eye emerged from the pipe with considerably more grace than Miles had managed. He pointed to the smaller staircase. Servants' access, he whispered. Less likely to be guarded. They moved silently toward the stairs. At the top, a simple wooden door stood closed but not locked. Miles eased it open a crack, peering into a kitchen. A Mexican woman worked alone, her back to the door. Before she could cry out, Eagle Eye stepped forward, speaking rapidly in Spanish. Miles caught only fragments. No harm. The child. Help us. To his surprise, the woman's expression shifted from fear to cautious interest. She responded in Spanish too quickly for Miles to follow, but he recognized the tone of someone providing information. Eagle Eye listened intently, then nodded. The child is upstairs, he whispered, as they slipped through the indicated door. Second floor. East wing. Room with blue door. One guard. The woman's helping us, Miles asked, surprised. Porter took her son 2 months ago. Sold him to work in the mines. She has been waiting for a chance at vengeance. They moved through the house with extreme caution. Twice they had to duck into empty rooms to avoid detection. Finally, they reached the east wing, climbing a back staircase to the second floor. The hallway stretched before them, doors on either side, one painted a distinctive blue. As Eagle Eye had warned, a guard stood outside, looking bored but alert. Miles and Eagle Eye withdrew to confer. "I'll take him," Miles decided, quick and quiet. Eagle Eye nodded, positioning himself to watch the hallway. Miles approached silently. The guard noticed him too late. Not a sound. Miles warned, pressing a small derringer to his ribs. "There's a second gun aimed at your back." It was a bluff, but the guard believed it, freezing in place. "The girl in that room, is she alone?" The guard nodded. "Keys." The guard slowly reached into his pocket and produced a ring of keys. As the guard complied, Miles brought the butt of the derringer down hard on the base of his skull. The man crumpled unconsciously to the floor. Eagle Eye moved swiftly to help Miles drag the guard into a nearby empty room where they bound and gagged him. Returning to the blue door, Miles tried keys until one turned in the lock. He eased the door open. The room beyond was surprisingly pleasant. A little girl sat on the bed, dark-haired and solemn, clutching a cloth doll. She looked up as the door opened, fear flashing across her face. "It's all right," Miles said softly, lowering his bandana. "We're friends of your mother. She sent us to take you to her." The girl, Sophia, regarded him suspiciously. "Where's my mama?" "Waiting for you." "Not far from here." Miles crouched to her level. "She asked me to give you this." He withdrew the drawing from his pocket. Sophia took it cautiously, recognition dawning in her eyes. "I made this for Mama," she whispered. "She kept it safe," Miles said. "And now she sent it back to you, so you'd know we really come from her." Sophia studied him, then Eagle Eye with a child's directness. "Are you going to hurt the bad men if we have to?" Miles answered honestly. "But right now, we just want to get you back to your mother. Can you come with us, quietly?" Sophia nodded. "Penny comes too." Of course, Miles agreed, guessing the doll's name. "Penny is very important." As Sophia slid off the bed, Eagle Eye suddenly tensed his head, turning toward the door. "Someone comes," he warned. Miles listened. Footsteps approached, multiple sets, moving with purpose. "Hide," he instructed Sophia, guiding her toward a large wardrobe. "No matter what happens, stay quiet." The little girl nodded solemnly and climbed into the wardrobe with her doll. Miles closed the door just as voices became audible in the hallway. "Check on the girl," a man was saying. "Porter wants her presentable for our guest." Miles and Eagle Eye exchanged glances. No time to hide. They positioned themselves on either side of the door, weapons ready. The door handle turned, but before the door could open fully, a commotion erupted elsewhere in the house. Shouting, the sound of breaking glass, then a gunshot. The person at the door hesitated, then the footsteps retreated rapidly. Miles moved to the window, peering out cautiously. In the courtyard below, men ran toward the main entrance, weapons drawn. "Something's wrong," he muttered. Eagle Eye joined him at the window. A diversion. Before Miles could respond, the answer presented itself in the form of Maria Dolores riding full tilt toward the house on horseback, firing a rifle into the air. "Damn it," Miles swore. "She was supposed to wait." The mother grew impatient, Eagle Eye observed. "Now we must adapt." Miles rapidly reassessed the situation. Maria Dolores's diversion would draw attention away from the East Wing temporarily, but also bring every guard on the property into alert status. New plan, he decided. "We use the confusion, take the girl out through the cellar, while everyone's focused on Maria Dolores." Eagle Eye nodded. Miles opened the wardrobe. "Change of plans," he told Sophia gently. "Your mother's here, but we need to move quickly and stay very quiet." "Can you do that?" Sophia nodded firmly. Miles lifted her into his arms, and together with Eagle Eye, they moved swiftly into the hallway. The house had erupted into chaos. They made it to the servants' staircase without being spotted, descending rapidly toward the kitchen. The Mexican woman who had helped them earlier stood by the cellar door, gesturing urgently for them to hurry. "Porter's men are everywhere," she warned. "The woman outside, they are trying to capture her." Miles felt a surge of fear for Maria Dolores, but forced himself to focus. "Thank you," he told the woman. "If you can create more confusion, anything to keep them distracted." She nodded, a fierce smile crossing her face. "With pleasure, senor." They descended into the cellar, moving quickly toward the water pipe. Miles set Sophia down, kneeling to explain. "This pipe leads outside. It's dark and wet, but it's our way out. I'll go first, then you follow, then my friend will come last. Can you be brave?" Sophia looked at the pipe dubiously, then back to Miles. Is Mama really outside? Yes, Miles promised. And she's in danger because she came for you. So we need to hurry. That seemed to decide the matter for Sophia. She nodded firmly. Miles was about to enter the pipe when the cellar door burst open. Two armed men stood in the doorway, weapons raised. Don't move, one shouted. Porter wants you. Eagle Eye reacted with lightning speed, raising the Remington and firing in one fluid motion. The first guard fell, but the second managed to get off a shot before Eagle Eye's second bullet found him. The bullet struck Miles in the left shoulder, spinning him against the wall. Pain exploded through his body. When his vision cleared, he saw Eagle Eye checking the fallen guards. Sophia stood frozen. It's all right, Miles gasped, fighting through the pain. We're still going. He pressed his right hand to the wound, feeling warm blood seeping between his fingers. Eagle Eye returned to his side. Through and through, he reported. You can travel. Good, because we have to. Miles straightened, wincing. More will come when they hear the shots. As if on cue, shouting erupted from above, followed by the sound of running feet. Go, Eagle Eye said firmly. Take the child. I will hold them here. Miles started to protest, but the Apache cut him off. There is no time to argue. The pipe is too small for a quick escape. Someone must delay pursuit. Eagle Eye's eyes held a warrior's resolve. I will find another way out. Miles knew he was right. We'll wait at the rendezvous point, he said, until sunset. Eagle Eye nodded once, then turned to Sophia. Go with him, little one. Your mother waits. Sophia hesitated, then stepped forward and pressed Penny the doll into Eagle Eye's hands. For luck, she said solemnly. Something flickered in the Apache's stoic expression. He accepted the doll with equal solemnity, then gently guided Sophia back to Miles. The documents are what matter, he reminded Miles. If I do not return, find the third map piece. Complete what was started. Miles clasped the Apache's shoulder briefly, a warrior's farewell. Then he turned to the pipe, ignoring the searing pain as he entered the dark tunnel. Sophia followed close behind. Behind them, Eagle Eye positioned himself by the cellar door, Remington rifle ready, Penny the doll tucked securely in his belt. The last thing Miles heard as he crawled deeper into the pipe was the sound of the cellar door bursting open, followed by Eagle Eye's defiant war cry and the thunder of the Remington. Then there was only darkness, the sound of water, and Sophia's frightened breathing as they made their escape. Pain has a voice. In the darkness of the water pipe, with cold water numbing his legs and blood soaking his shirt, Miles listened to that voice. It spoke of limits, of mortality, of reasons to give up. But now there was another voice, small and frightened, coming from behind him. Mister, are you okay? Sophia whispered. I'm fine, Miles lied, pushing forward. Not much farther now. The pain in his shoulder flared with each movement, but he focused on the task: get the girl out, find Maria Dolores, complete the mission. The simplicity of purpose kept him moving. Light appeared ahead. Miles increased his pace, ignoring the black spots dancing at the edges of his vision. He reached the grate, and with a final push emerged into the sunlight. Sophia followed. She stood uncertainly, soaking wet and shivering, looking back toward Porter's estate. What about the other man? The one with the nice face? Miles struggled to his feet. He'll find another way out. He hoped he wasn't lying. Gunfire erupted from the direction of the house, multiple shots. Miles instinctively pulled Sophia behind the cover of a large cottonwood, scanning for threats. We need to move, he told her. Stay close to me. Run when I run. Stop when I stop. Can you do that? The little girl nodded, her eyes far too serious for a child her age. They set off, keeping low, using the sparse vegetation for cover. The sound of pursuit reached them before they'd gone half a mile, men on horseback spreading out from the estate searching. Miles picked up Sophia without warning, ignoring the explosion of pain, and sprinted for a shallow ravine. They reached it just as riders crested a nearby hill. Miles dropped into the ravine, cradling Sophia and pressing them both against the earth. Sophia remained remarkably silent, seeming to understand instinctively the need for absolute quiet. Hoofbeats approached, slowed, then stopped directly above them. Miles held his breath, feeling Sophia's small body trembling against his. See anything? A man's voice called. Nothing, another replied. Could have gone east toward the rocks. Check the creek bed. Porter wants the kid alive. The others shoot on sight. The horses moved off, but Miles remained motionless, counting to 100 before cautiously raising his head. The riders had split up. "We need to keep moving," he whispered to Sophia. They continued through the ravine, which eventually deepened into a dry wash. The going was slow. Miles needed to check frequently for pursuers, and his strength was ebbing as blood loss took its toll. Sophia walked beside him, uncomplaining occasionally, reaching up to hold his hand when the terrain grew difficult. Her trust humbled him, reminding him of another small hand that had once held his. The sun was beginning its westward descent when they finally approached the stand of scrub oak where they'd left the horses. Miles approached cautiously, signaling Sophia to remain hidden. The horses were gone. So was Maria Dolores. Miles fought down a surge of despair. Without mounts, their chances of escaping diminished drastically. And Maria Dolores, had she been captured, killed, or had she simply been forced to flee? He returned to Sophia, trying to keep his expression neutral. "Change of plans," he said. "We need to find a place to hide until dark." "Where's Mama?" Sophia asked. Miles hesitated. "I'm not sure yet, but we'll find her." Sophia seemed to accept this, though her small face grew even more solemn. "Is it because she came to help us? Is she in trouble?" "Your mother is very brave," Miles said, avoiding a direct answer, "and very smart. She'll be all right." He hoped that wasn't another lie. They found shelter in a small cave formed by fallen boulders. As they settled in to wait, Miles tore strips from his shirt to fashion a crude bandage for his shoulder. The bleeding had slowed, but the wound was beginning to show signs of infection. Sophia watched him work. "My papa taught me about wounds," she said suddenly, "before the bad men hurt him." Miles looked up surprised. "Your father taught you?" She nodded. "Papa was a newspaper man, but he knew doctor things too. He said everyone should." She studied Miles's bandage. "You need clean water and honey. That's what Papa always said for bad cuts." "Your father was right," Miles said, touched by her concern. "We'll find those things when we can." "Papa's in heaven now," Sophia continued matter-of-factly. "The bad judge sent men to hurt him because Papa was writing true things the judge didn't like." Miles nodded, uncertain how to respond to a child's understanding of murder. "Mama said we had to be extra careful after that. She taught me to hide things in my doll Penny." Her face fell. "I gave Penny to your friend to help him be brave." "That was very kind of you," Miles said gently. "Eagerly will take good care of Penny." Sophia studied him intently. "Are you a good man or a bad man, mister?" The question, delivered with a child's directness, caught Miles off guard. "I've done both good and bad things," he said, finally. "But right now I'm trying to do good." Sophia seemed to accept this. "Mama says most people are mixed up, not all good or all bad." "Your mother is wise," Miles said. "She's a teacher," Sophia replied, as if that explained everything. Then, after a pause, "I'm scared for her." Miles reached out, gently resting his hand on her small shoulder. "I know, but we'll find her. I promise." As the afternoon wore on, Sophia eventually dozed off. Miles remained vigilant, watching for any sign of pursuit or of Maria Dolores and Eagle Eye. His thoughts turned to the Apache warrior. Eagle Eye had stayed behind, facing unknown odds. The sacrifice reminded Miles of companions lost in war. He hadn't expected to find such brotherhood again, especially not with a man whose people he had once helped destroy. As shadows lengthened, Miles's vigilance was rewarded. Movement caught his eye, a lone rider approaching cautiously. Miles tensed, then relaxed as he recognized the distinctive silhouette, Maria Dolores. He watched her for several minutes, confirming she was alone before gently waking Sophia. "Your mother's here," he whispered. Sophia was instantly alert. Miles had to hold her back. "Wait, we need to be careful." He took a small mirror from his pocket, a scout's tool for signaling, and angled it to catch the setting sun, sending a brief flash of light in Maria Dolores' direction. She reined in her horse, immediately searching for the source. Miles flashed the mirror again, then emerged cautiously from cover. Maria Dolores spotted him and spurred her horse forward. As she drew closer, Miles could see she was injured. A bloodied bandage wrapped around her upper arm, her face scratched and dirt-streaked, but her eyes were alert and determined. "Miles," she called, relief evident in her voice. "Thank God." Then she saw Sophia. Maria Dolores practically fell from the saddle in her haste to reach her daughter. Sophia broke free from Miles's protective hand and ran to her mother, the two colliding in a desperate embrace. "Sophia, my baby, my girl." Maria Dolores sobbed. Are you hurt? Did they hurt you? I'm okay, Mama Sofia assured her. The nice man took care of me. Maria Dolores looked up at Miles over her daughter's head, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Miles nodded, uncomfortable with her gratitude, but moved by the reunion. We need to move, he said gently. Porter's men are still searching. Maria Dolores composed herself. Yes, of course. She examined Miles more closely, noticing his blood-soaked shirt. You're wounded. It'll keep, he said dismissively. What happened? Where's the other horse? Maria Dolores' expression darkened. Porter's men. I managed to create a diversion, but they pursued me. I lost them in the hills, but my horse went lame. Had to leave it. She glanced around. Where's Eagley? Stayed behind to cover our escape, Miles said grimly. Said he'd meet us at the rendezvous. Maria Dolores' face fell. Do you think he... I don't know, Miles admitted, but we can't wait here to find out. With only one horse, they'd have to double up. Head for Holloway's place in town. It's our best chance. Maria Dolores nodded, then looked down at Sophia. Sweetheart, where's Penny? Where's your doll? Sophia's face grew solemn. I gave her to the man with a nice face. For luck. Maria Dolores and Miles exchanged a significant look. The map piece hidden in the doll was now with Eagle Eye. That was very generous, Maria Dolores told her daughter. I'm sure she's helping him. They mounted up, Maria Dolores in the saddle with Sophia before her, Miles behind. The horse protested the weight, but seemed strong enough to manage at a walking pace. They set off toward Tombstone as twilight deepened into night. Miles found himself fighting to stay conscious, the pain in his shoulder now a constant burning presence. Maria Dolores seemed to sense his struggle, occasionally reaching back to steady him. Not much farther, she murmured. They reached the outskirts of Tombstone well after midnight. Holloway's house stood on a quiet street. They approached from the rear, using alleys and back streets. In the small stable behind the house, they dismounted. Miles nearly collapsed as his feet hit the ground, saved from falling only by Maria Dolores' quick support. You need a doctor, she said worriedly. No doctors, Miles insisted. Too many questions. Just need rest. Maria Dolores looked unconvinced, but didn't argue. Wait here with Sophia. I'll see if Holloway will help us. She approached the back door and knocked softly. After a moment, a light appeared. The door opened, revealing James Holloway in a dressing gown, a small derringer in his hand. Brief conversation ensued. Holloway glanced in Miles's direction, nodded, then disappeared back inside. Maria Dolores returned to the stable. He'll help, she reported. There's a guest room at the back of the house where we can stay. He's sending his housekeeper to prepare it. Miles nodded weakly. Good, but we can't stay long. Porter has connections in town. Eventually, someone will talk. First, we need to tend that wound, Maria Dolores said firmly. You're no good to anyone if you die of infection. Miles couldn't argue. He allowed Maria Dolores and Holloway to help him into the house and up a narrow servant's staircase to a secluded room on the second floor. Sophia followed silently. The room was simply but comfortably furnished. Holloway's housekeeper, an older woman with a kind face, had already prepared hot water, clean bandages, and a tray of medical supplies. My late wife was a nurse during the war, Holloway explained. I kept her things. He surveyed Miles. That needs proper treatment. I can send for Dr. Williams. He's discreet. No, Miles said firmly. Too risky. I can manage, Maria Dolores interjected. My father was a doctor. I assisted him often. Holloway nodded. I'll leave you to it then. There are clean clothes in the wardrobe. Food will be brought up shortly, he turned to Sophia. Would you like some hot chocolate? Young lady. Sophia looked to her mother for permission, then nodded shyly. Come along, then Holloway said kindly. Let's let your mother work. When they had gone, Maria Dolores turned to Miles. Shirt off. Let me see how bad it island. Miles complied. The wound was ugly. The bullet had passed clean through, but the edges were red and inflamed. Maria Dolores worked methodically, cleaning the wound with carbolic solution, probing gently to ensure no fabric remained inside. Miles endured in silence, though sweat beaded on his forehead. You're lucky, she said, as she began bandaging. Another inch to the right, and the bullet would have hit bone. As it is, you'll have a new scar to add to your collection. Miles glanced down at his torso, marked with the evidence of past battles. What's one more? He said wryly. Maria Dolores's fingers paused on a particularly vicious scar that ran across his ribs. Apache Comanche Miles corrected 1,868 scouting mission in Texas. Her hands resumed their work, gentle yet efficient. You've lived quite a life. Not always one to be proud of, Miles admitted. Maria Dolores secured the bandage, then helped him into a clean shirt. You saved my daughter today, she said softly. Whatever you did before, that's something to be proud of. Before Miles could respond, a knock at the door announced the return of Sophia with Holloway's housekeeper, who carried a tray of food. Eat, the woman instructed, then rest. The little one will sleep in my room tonight. Sophia looked uncertainly at her mother. Can I stay with you, Mama, tonight? You'll have a special adventure with Mrs. Peterson, Maria Dolores said. I need to look after Mr. Sullivan and his hurt shoulder. We'll be together in the morning. Sophia considered this, then nodded solemnly. Okay, but you promise to be here when I wake up? I promise, Maria Dolores said, embracing her daughter tightly. I'm never leaving you again. After Sophia had gone, Maria Dolores and Miles ate in silence, both too exhausted for conversation. The food revived Miles somewhat, but the ordeal of the day soon caught up with him. He found himself struggling to keep his eyes open. Maria Dolores noticed his fatigue. Sleep, she said. I'll keep watch. Wake me in a few hours, Miles insisted. You need rest too. Maria Dolores nodded, though whether in agreement or merely to placate him wasn't clear. Miles lay back on the bed, intending only to rest his eyes for a moment. He was asleep almost instantly. He dreamed of fire villages burning along Sherman's March, a farmhouse in flames, his wife and son trapped inside while he was hundreds of miles away, Porter's estate going up in smoke, Eagle Eye silhouetted against the blaze. He woke with a start, disoriented, reaching instinctively for a weapon that wasn't there. Easy, a soft voice said from nearby. You're safe. Maria Dolores sat in a chair by the window, a shawl around her shoulders, the first gray light of dawn illuminating her face. She looked tired but alert, a small revolver resting in her lap. You were supposed to wake me, he said, noting that he'd slept through the night. You needed the rest more than I needed sleep, she replied simply. Miles sat up, carefully testing his shoulder. The pain had subsided to a dull throb. Any sign of Eagle Eye, he asked. Maria Dolores shook her head. Nothing. Holloway sent a man to watch the roads into town. No Apache matching his description has been seen. Miles absorbed this grimly. The odds of Eagle Eye surviving had been slim at best, and the map piece, the one in Sophia's doll, gone with him. If he's been captured rather than killed, Porter could have two pieces now, she finished. Miles finished the thought, and nowhere after the third. Maria Dolores nodded. Holloway thinks Porter will move quickly. The government man who arrived yesterday is a land commissioner here, specifically about the Apache claims. If Porter finds the documents first, he'll destroy them, and the Apache lose their land forever. Miles concluded. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, fighting a wave of dizziness. We need to get to that third piece before Porter does. A knock at the door interrupted her. Holloway entered, his face grave. Porter's men are in town, he announced without preamble. 6 of them, asking questions, showing your descriptions. They've been to the sheriff already. Miles stood. We need to leave, not through the streets. Holloway cautioned. They're watching the roads. But there's another way. He crossed to the window, pointing to a neighboring rooftop. The buildings connect. You can make your way to the livery stable 3 blocks over. I've arranged for horses to be waiting, Sophia, Maria Dolores asked immediately. My housekeeper is preparing her. She'll meet you at the stable. Holloway handed a small bundle to Miles. Food, ammunition, and this. He produced a folded paper, his piece of the map. Take it. I've memorized it, and it's safer with you than in the bank. Miles accepted the map with a nod of thanks. What about you? Porter will suspect you helped us. Holloway gave a thin smile. I'm not without influence in this town, and at my age there's little left to fear. He straightened his shoulders. Now go quickly. They followed Holloway's directions, climbing out the window onto a sloped roof, then making their way across connected buildings. Miles moved slowly, his wounded shoulder limiting his agility, but Maria Dolores stayed close, offering support. They reached the stable without incident, finding Mrs. Peterson waiting with Sophia, who was dressed in boy's clothing for disguise. Two horses stood saddled and ready along with a small pack mule loaded with supplies. Holloway thinks of everything, Miles observed. A good banker plans for contingencies, Mrs. Peterson replied, handing Sophia up to Maria Dolores. Now hurry. My husband is creating a distraction on Allen Street to draw away Porter's men. As if on cue, shouting erupted from the direction of the main street, followed by the sound of breaking glass. That's our signal, Miles said, mounting his horse with effort. Which way? South, Maria Dolores decided. Away from Porter's estate. We can circle back to the area shown on the map once we're clear. They rode out the back of the stable, and the commotion on Allen Street allowed them to slip away unnoticed. Once beyond the town limits, they increased their pace. Miles studied Holloway's map piece as they rode, comparing it to the fragment Eagle Eye had carried. Together, a clearer picture emerged. The location is in the Dragoon Mountains, he determined. A cave system near a formation called Cochise's stronghold. Maria Dolores nodded. Esteban and I explored those mountains. The Apache consider them sacred ground. It makes sense they'd hide their most important documents there. But it's rough country, Miles said. Easy to get lost if you don't know exactly where you're going. Which is why the map is in 3 pieces, Maria Dolores said. No one person could find it alone. They rode through the morning and into the afternoon. As they prepared to resume riding after a brief stop, Sophia suddenly pointed to the horizon behind them. Riders, she said simply. Miles and Maria Dolores turned to look. A dust cloud approached from the direction of Tombstone, multiple riders moving fast. Porter's men, Miles said grimly. They've picked up our trail. Maria Dolores lifted Sophia back onto her horse. How far to the mountains? Too far to outrun them, Miles assessed. We need to find a defensible position. He scanned the terrain ahead. To the east, a cluster of large boulders rose from the desert floor. Not ideal, but better than nothing. There, he pointed. We'll make our stand at those rocks. They rode hard, reaching the boulder formation just as their pursuers came clearly into view, 8 riders heavily armed with Porter himself at their head. The boulders formed a rough circle. Miles helped Maria Dolores and Sophia dismount, sending the horses into the center of the formation where they would be protected. Stay low, he instructed Maria Dolores, handing her Holloway's revolver. Use the lower firing positions. I'll take the high ground. Maria Dolores nodded, her face set with determination. She guided Sophia to a protected alcove. Stay here no matter what happens, she told her daughter. Don't come out until I call you. Sophia's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded bravely. I will, Mama. Miles climbed to the top of the largest boulder. The pain in his shoulder was a searing fire, but he ignored it. Porter raised his hand, halting his men just beyond comfortable rifle range. He urged his horse forward a few paces, calling out in a voice that carried clearly, Mrs. Morgan, Mr. Sullivan, there's no need for bloodshed. I only want what's mine. Nothing here belongs to you, Porter, Miles shouted back. The map piece is mine by law, Porter replied. And the girl, she's a material witness in a criminal case. Maria Dolores had joined Miles on the boulder. You're the criminal, she called, her voice shaking with fury. You murdered my husband, branded me like an animal. Porter seemed unperturbed. I did what was necessary, just as I'm doing now. He gestured to his men. I have 8 armed deputies with me. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender the map pieces and I'll let you live. He's lying, Miles said quietly to Maria Dolores. He can't let us live. We know too much. Maria Dolores nodded. I know. She checked her weapons. How long can we hold them off? Miles assessed their situation. Not long. Maybe an hour if we're careful. Less if they rush us. Is that enough time for help to arrive? Maria Dolores asked. What help? Miles asked, surprised. I sent a message with Mrs. Peterson, she explained, to Lieutenant Hayes at Fort Huachuca, Esteban's cousin, telling him about Porter, the documents, everything. Miles felt a flicker of hope. We need to buy time, he said. Keep them talking as long as possible. Porter's voice rang out again. Time's up. What's your answer? Miles stood, presenting himself as a target to draw attention from Maria Dolores. You want the map pieces? Porter, come and get them. Porter's face darkened. He raised his arm about to signal his men when a new sound interrupted the standoff. A single rifle shot coming not from the boulder formation, but from the desert to the west. One of Porter's men jerked in his saddle, then toppled to the ground. The others wheeled in confusion. Another shot rang out. Another man fell. Precise, deadly shooting from an unseen marksman. Scatter, Porter ordered. But before they could comply, a war cry split the air, a high, ululating sound that raised the hair on the back of Miles's neck. He knew that cry. Eagerly, he breathed, scarcely believing it. From behind a distant ridge, a lone rider appeared, charging directly toward Porter's men. The Apache warrior rode low over his horse's neck, the Remington rifle in one hand, firing with impossible accuracy. Porter's men broke formation. Porter himself remained frozen for a moment. Miles seized the opportunity, raising his rifle and taking careful aim. But before he could fire, more riders appeared on the horizon. A dozen mounted men in the blue uniforms of the U.S. Cavalry, led by a young officer who could only be Lieutenant Hayes. "Army's here," Miles shouted to Maria Dolores. "We made it." Porter, seeing the approaching soldiers, finally spurred his horse into motion, fleeing toward the east. Two of his men followed. Eagle Eye, still charging, adjusted his course to pursue Porter. Miles made a split-second decision. "Stay with Sophia," he told Maria Dolores. "I'm going after them." Before she could protest, he was sliding down the boulder, running for his horse. The pain in his shoulder was forgotten, replaced by a burning determination. Porter couldn't be allowed to escape. Miles mounted and spurred his horse after Eagle Eye. The desert flew by, in a blur of dust and heat. Ahead, he could see Eagle Eye gaining on Porter. One of Porter's men turned in his saddle, firing wildly. Eagle Eye swayed but kept riding. Porter and his men were heading for a narrow canyon. Miles angled his course to intercept them. His horse stumbled but recovered. Miles was close enough now to see Porter's face contorted with rage and fear. The judge turned, saw Miles approaching, and raised a pistol. The shot went wide. Miles returned fire, his bullets striking Porter's horse. The animal screamed and fell, throwing its rider heavily to the ground. Porter's two companions rode on, without stopping. Miles reined in near the fallen judge, dismounting, with his rifle trained on Porter. Eagle Eye arrived moments later, blood streaming from a wound in his side, but his eyes clear and focused. Porter struggled to his feet, his fine black suit covered in dust. But his eyes showed no defeat, only a cold, calculating hatred. "You've ruined everything," he spat. "Years of planning, destroyed by a washed-up scout and an Apache savage." "It's over, Porter," Miles said. "The cavalry is coming. You'll stand trial for murder, kidnapping, corruption." Porter laughed. "You think a judge fears trials? I have friends in the territorial government in Washington itself. Men who understand what's at stake here. The Apache land," Miles said. "The gold, not just gold." Porter sneered. "Power. Control of water rights across the territory. Millions in mining concessions. Did you think this was about a few bags of Union gold? It doesn't matter what it was about." Miles said. "You lost." Porter's hand moved, suddenly drawing a derringer from his sleeve. Miles fired instinctively, his bullet striking Porter in the chest. The judge staggered but remained standing, his own weapon now aimed at Miles. Before he could fire, a second shot rang out. Eagle Eye's Remington. Porter jerked backward, a look of genuine surprise crossing his face before he collapsed to the ground. Miles approached cautiously. Porter was dead, his eyes staring sightlessly at the Arizona sky. Eagle Eye dismounted slowly, pressing his hand to his wounded side. From his belt he withdrew Sophia's doll, Penny, miraculously intact despite everything. "The child will want this returned," he said simply. Miles stared at the Apache, taking in his bloodied appearance. "How did you escape the estate?" "The Mexican woman helped. Showed me tunnels beneath the house used by servants." Eagle Eye's face remained impassive, but his eyes held a hint of amusement. Porter did not think servants worth noticing. "His mistake. You followed us to town." Eagle Eye nodded. "Watched from distance. Saw Porter's men searching. Followed when you fled." He gestured to the approaching cavalry. "Found them on the road." The young officer knew Maria Dolores' husband. The cavalry unit reached them, Lieutenant Hayes at their head. "Miss Morgan said you might need assistance," Hayes said dryly, taking in the scene. "Appears she was right." Miles nodded toward Porter. He resisted arrest. Hayes dismounted, examining the body. "So I see. The territory will be better for his absence." He straightened, facing Miles and Eagle Eye. "The documents. As you mentioned, the Apache land treaties. Were they safe beyond the reach of men like Porter?" Eagle Eye said. Hayes considered this, then nodded. "Good. They should remain so until they can be properly authenticated." He glanced at Porter again. This man had powerful friends. They'll want explanations. Tell them he died, pursuing dangerous fugitives, Miles suggested. It's true enough. Hayes smiled faintly. Indeed. And the gold? What gold? Miles asked innocently. The lieutenant laughed. I see. He gestured to his men. Secure the body. We'll return to the boulder formation for Mrs. Morgan and her daughter. West, and the soldiers carried out their orders. Miles turned to Eagle Eye, who was leaning more heavily against his horse. You need a doctor, Miles observed. Later, Eagle Eye said dismissively. First, we must secure what was hidden. With Porter dead, others will come looking. The cave and the dragoons. Miles agreed. We have 2 map pieces now. Yours and Holloway's. Is it enough? Eagle Eye nodded. For one who knows the mountains, as I do, yes. Miles studied his unlikely ally, a man whose people he had once helped persecute, now a comrade bound by shared purpose and survival. Why did you come back? He asked. You could have taken the map pieces and gone directly to the cave. Secured the documents and gold for your people. Eagle Eye was silent for a moment. Then he said simply, a warrior does not abandon his brothers in battle. You fought for the child, for the woman that made you my brother. The simple declaration touched Miles deeply. In the midst of bloodshed and betrayal, this man had found something worth honoring. Not gold or documents, but loyalty itself. The child saved my life. Eagle Eye added, patting the doll secured at his belt. Her gift brought luck, as she said it would. Miles smiled. She'll be glad to know that. They mounted up, rejoining the cavalry, for the ride back to the boulder formation. As they approached, Miles saw Maria Dolores standing tall among the rocks, Sophia beside her, both watching anxiously for their return. When she spotted Miles and Eagle Eye, Maria Dolores' face transformed with relief. She lifted Sophia into her arms and descended to meet them. You're alive, she breathed as Miles dismounted. Both of you. Porter isn't, Miles informed her. It's over. Maria Dolores absorbed this, her expression a complex mixture of relief and vindication. Esteban can rest now, she said softly. Eagle Eye dismounted carefully, his wound finally taking its toll. He approached Sophia, who watched him with wide, curious eyes. I brought someone back to you, he said, unhooking Penny from his belt and presenting the doll with formal dignity. Sophia accepted the doll reverently. Did she help you be brave? Very brave, Eagle Eye confirmed. She saved my life. Sophia beamed, clutching Penny to her chest. I knew she would. Lieutenant Hayes approached, removing his hat respectfully. Mrs. Morgan, I'm Esteban's cousin James Hayes. I received your message. I'm sorry I couldn't arrive sooner. You came when it mattered, most, Maria Dolores assured him. Thank you. Hayes nodded. We should move out soon. Porter's remaining men may regroup. I'd like to get you safely to the fort before nightfall. Miles exchanged a glance with Eagle Eye. We have something to take care of first. The documents Porter was seeking. Hayes understood immediately. The Apache land treaties. Yes, they should be secured before news of Porter's death spreads. He considered for a moment. Take 2 of my men as escort. The rest of us will bring Mrs. Morgan and her daughter to Fort Huachuca. Maria Dolores shook her head. We stay together, all of us. Hayes began to protest, but Miles raised a hand. She's right. We've come this far together. We'll finish it the same way. The young lieutenant looked from Miles to Maria Dolores to Eagle Eye, recognizing the bond that had formed between these unlikely allies. Very well, but we move quickly. Those mountains are no place to be caught after dark. They set out within the hour, a strange procession, cavalry soldiers, a school teacher, and her daughter, a former scout and an Apache warrior. Their destination, a hidden cave in the Dragoon Mountains, where secrets had lain buried since the Civil War. The journey was arduous, especially for Eagle Eye, whose wound required proper treatment. Yet he rode without complaint as he guided them along ancient Apache trails. As the sun began to set, they reached a distinctive rock formation, a natural arch spanning 2 towering pillars of stone. Eagle Eye pointed to a narrow cleft at the base of the western pillar. There, he said, the entrance. Miles dismounted, helping Maria Dolores and Sophia down from their horse. Lieutenant Hayes ordered his men to establish a perimeter. Holloway's map shows a specific route through the cave system, Miles said, withdrawing the banker's map piece. Without it, We could wander for days. Eagle Eye nodded, producing his own fragment. Together, the pieces revealed a path. I will lead, Eagle Eye said. I have been here before as a boy with my father. They lit torches, then entered the narrow cleft. The passage widened almost immediately into a tall cavern. The walls were adorned with ancient pictographs, Apache symbols telling stories that predated European arrival. Eagle Eye moved confidently through the space. The others followed closely, Sophia clinging to her mother's hand. They passed through chamber after chamber. Finally, after nearly an hour of careful progress, they reached a small, perfectly circular chamber. A shaft of fading daylight pierced the darkness from a hole in the ceiling, illuminating a flat stone in the center of the room. Eagle Eye approached the stone reverently. This is the place. He ran his hands across the stone's surface, finding an almost invisible seam. With practiced movements, he pressed specific points. There was a soft click, and the top of the stone shifted slightly. Together, Miles and Eagle Eye slid the heavy stone lid aside, revealing a cavity beneath. Within lay several oilskin-wrapped packages and a small iron chest. Eagle Eye carefully lifted out the packages, unwrapping the first to reveal yellow documents, the land treaties signed by Apache leaders and Union Army officers. The proof, Eagle Eye said softly. My people's claim to their homeland. The iron chest, when open, contained gold coins. Payment for Apache assistance during the war, Eagle Eye explained. Lieutenant Hayes examined one of the documents. These appear genuine. The Land Commission will need to verify them, but if authentic, they supersede any subsequent claims. They are authentic, Eagle Eye said with quiet certainty. My father was present when they were signed. His mark is here. He pointed to a symbol among the Apache signatures. Hayes nodded respectfully. Then justice may finally be done for your people. They carefully repacked the documents in gold. As they prepared to leave the cave, Sophia suddenly spoke up. What about Penny, she asked, holding up her doll. Doesn't she get a reward for helping? The adults exchanged amused glances. Eagle Eye crouched to Sophia's level, his usual stoic expression softening. Penny's reward is returning to you. Oh, he reached into the chest, selecting a single gold coin. With solemn ceremony, he presented it to Sophia for her bravery. Sophia accepted the coin with equal solemnity, carefully tucking it into Penny's dress pocket. Thank you. As they emerged from the cave into the gathering dusk, Miles found himself standing slightly apart. A strange feeling washed over him, a sense of completion, of purpose fulfilled. For years he had hidden from the world. Yet, in the span of a few days, he had found himself drawn back into life's complexities, its dangers and sorrows, but also its bonds of loyalty and unexpected moments of grace. Maria Dolores approached, leaving Sophia chatting animatedly with a young soldier. What will you do now? She asked quietly. I don't know. My ranch is gone, Porter's dead, but his allies might still come looking for revenge. You could come with us, Maria Dolores suggested. Hayes has offered me a teaching position at the fort. Sophia would be safe there. They need men who know the territory, who can teach soldiers to survive in this land. Men who remember what it means to fight for something worth fighting for. Miles glanced at Eagle Eye, who was waiting patiently. What about him? He returns to his people, Maria Dolores said, to bring them the documents that prove their rights. But he said to tell you that brothers are always welcome in his camp. The simple message touched Miles deeply. As the group prepared to depart, Miles made his decision. He wouldn't return to isolation. He would face the future directly. He mounted his horse, taking his place beside Maria Dolores and Sophia. The little girl smiled up at him, her face alight with trust and affection. Ready? Maria Dolores asked. Miles nodded, finding himself genuinely smiling for the first time in longer than he could remember. Ready? They rode down from the mountains as night fell across the desert, the stars emerging one by one above them. But for Miles Sullivan, the world had changed irrevocably. His soul, long dried and hardened like the desert itself, had found water again, had found life. As they descended into the valley, Eagle Eye raised his hand in farewell, turning his horse toward the Apache lands to the north. Miles returned the gesture, a promise between warriors who had found unexpected brotherhood. The desert, which had for so long been his refuge from life, had become the place where he found it again. Desert souls no longer lost riding toward home.